Hi, and welcome to lecture 22. Today we're going to take a look at three Asian countries as we continue to look at Asia. We're going to look at Japan, China, and Taiwan. Now, mostly we're going to focus on Taiwan because we're going to come back and pick up China and Japan a little bit later. So let's pull up the map. All right, here's Asia. This is actually the same map that you'll see on your final. We already know a little bit about Asia because we talked about the biggest country by space in the world, and that, of course, is Russia. Russia is huge, and it's all strung up here. But today, we're going to take a look at this country over here. You probably know what that is because you're thinking back, oh, wait a minute, we looked at this sea right here, and this is the Sea of Japan, so this must be Japan over here. And you are absolutely right. And this big honker right here, this is China. China has the largest population in the world. I think that's one of your test questions. And then primarily, we're going to focus on this little country right down here, little island country that goes by the name of Taiwan. Officially, its name is the Republic of China. And China, its official name is the People's Republic of China. This China claims this China. And this China claims this China. Oh my goodness, how is that going to work out, huh? We'll get to that story here in just a minute. Okay, so up here we have Japan, here we have China, here we have Taiwan. We have the Sea of Japan right here. Anybody remember this sea? Yep, South China Sea, because it's south of China. What's this big ocean over here? Yep, that's the Pacific. And here's the Indian down here, and actually this is considered the Indian over here too. All right, let's pull up some notes. And we'll talk about these three countries, Japan, China, and Taiwan. Okay, I want you to take a look at the three countries contrasted by population, size, gross domestic product, and gross domestic product per capita. Okay, gross domestic product is the total sum of all goods and services created in a country. The more productive the country, the higher the gross domestic product. This tells us a lot about the country, also tells us a lot about the size of the country. A better measure of how well are the people in the country doing is the gross domestic product per capita. Basically, you take the gross domestic product, you divide it by the number of people that live there, and that tells the gross domestic product per capita. Okay, so let's do the comparison. People's Republic of China, China, 1.4 billion people, a whole lot of people, okay? Japan, only 126 million. Taiwan, little tiny Taiwan, only 24 million. Okay, take a look at the sizes. Up here we have a huge country, China. Japan, it's about the size of California, except in California we have about 33 million people. In Japan we have 126 million. And little Taiwan, not very big. Okay. Here's the gross domestic product, China and Japan and little Taiwan down here. However, look at that per capita. Which country is doing the best? China, yeah, they make about 21,000. Per capita in Japan is a respectable 47,000. Japan is doing well. Look at Taiwan, $55,000. That compares very well with the United States, which is about $65,000. Okay? So you can see that while all of these are what we would consider first world country, that is industrialized and productive, there are real differences between the three. Okay, so let's scroll down and look at more information. Okay, let's start with Taiwan. Remember, their official name is Republic of China. They have been there, the Taiwanese people have been there forever. There is some ethnic cultural differences between the Taiwanese and the Chinese. That has faded over the years that China has been in control of Taiwan and when China kind of took it over. They first took it over in 1683. Now, China itself has had highs and lows as a powerful political force. I was feeling it was pretty good shape back in 1683, enough so that it annexed Taiwan, made it part of China. However, China then began to kind of fall apart. Remember, we talked about the era of colonization in Africa. We had the era of colonization, not just in Africa, but all over the world, and including in China. Western powers were coming in and grabbing chunks of China as their exclusive little trade zones. Okay? Not quite colonies, but they were very much in charge of the place. The Chinese government was too weak to really do anything about it. Japan also was behaving like one of these imperialistic European powers. Now, Japan, of course, is in Asia. It is Asian, but Japan does some rather interesting things. They look at what's happening in China and they realize if we don't change and become more Western, it's going to happen to us too. And so through some very enlightened Japanese leadership, they tend to Westernize to the point that they are grabbing part of China, Taiwan, actually they grab Korea's too, to be part of Japan. They're acting like the Western powers. We'll talk more about that when we get to Japan. Yeah, Japan does some pretty amazing things, including 1904, the Russo-Japanese War. They defeat one of the great European powers. They actually defeat Russia in a war, but more on that when we get to Japan. Okay, so that was 1895. China surrenders Taiwan to Japan. What happens, about 4 decades later, 3 or 4 decades later, we see the start of World War II. But before we jump into that, let's take a look at what's going on in China. China, remember I told you, is all broken up and a very weak government, and it's run by a bunch of different warlords in different places. There are 2 people that are trying to unify and strengthen China. One of them is what we call a nationalist leader, a guy named Chiang Kai-shek. He's basically the son of one of the warlords, and he says, I'm going to bring it all together. The other is an interesting young guy named Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong is born in a village to an middle class family. Works real hard at school, gets good grades, gets sent off to the university. At the university, he's thrown in with all the children of these warlords who are rich and hoity-toity and think they're really great. He's from the countryside, hick from the sticks, doesn't have a lot of money. He's there on scholarship, still has to work for a living. They kind of give him a bad time. But his job at the university is working in the library. Now, what a great place to work, right? He's got lots of time to read, and he studies like crazy. He starts reading all the communist doctrines and becomes a communist. He decides he is going to unify China as a communist country. So pretty soon you have the nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek, you have the communists under Mao Zedong, and they begin to fight against each other. They kind of stop fighting each other in 1937 when the Japanese invade China. Now, we usually think, World War II, yeah, that starts September 1st, 1939, when Germany invades Poland. Maybe in Europe, often Americans would think, yeah, World War II, December 7th, 1942, Pearl Harbor. Yeah, actually it's going on before then. Right back to 1937, summer of 1937, Japan attacks China. Lots of people say this is the start of World War II. The Chinese enjoy great success at first, but eventually get bogged down trying to control China, which is a huge place for little Japan to try and get involved with. Well, you know the story. The United States gets involved with the war in Japan after Pearl Harbor. Eventually, we drop a couple nukes on Japan, and Japan surrenders. World War II is over. China takes Taiwan back, okay? China says, hey, yeah, we ceded that to Japan under pressure. We're in charge now. We're taking Taiwan back. Okay, remember the nationalists and the communists. Soon as the war with Japan is over, they just take a deep breath and start fighting each other. And this drags on for another 4 years until finally the communists win. Communists win for a multitude of reasons, which I don't have time to go into, but I would like to because it's really kind of interesting. So what are the nationalists going to do? The nationalists are in full retreat. Where do they retreat to? They retreat to the island of Taiwan. 2 million of them moved to Taiwan. Many of the Taiwanese were not really excited about this. Nonetheless, the 2 million Chinese come in, they take over Taiwan, they declare themselves the legitimate government of all of China, and they have a military government there for a couple decades then. Well, during the 60s, Taiwan does some really great economic growth. They've got a lot of brains, they get a lot of investment, they make some smart moves, and they become a real economic powerhouse. This little tiny island of 23 million people. Remember, we looked at the gross domestic product per capita. They get very strong very quickly. And then as they move along, late 80s, early 90s, they kind of evolve into a democracy, and that's what we have them as right now. However, we have giant China, 1.4 billion. We have little Taiwan. Taiwan has retained the United Nations seat for all of China. Now, obviously, this is kind of weird, and reality begins to set in, and the UN eventually says, okay, Taiwan, you guys are, yeah, you're lovely, but realistically, the government of China is the communist Chinese government. So 1971, Taiwan is replaced on the United Nations. Now, as I mentioned, Taiwan is highly developed. It's 15th in the world by GDP per capita. Very equalitarian society, very little poverty there. But it does live with this huge threat from China. Now, China claims the country, refers to it as a renegade republic, and basically their plan has always been to take back Taiwan, either militarily or some other way. They say, yeah, you're ours. We are coming to get you at some point. So why don't they just come over and take them out militarily? Two things stop them from doing that. The first is the Strait of Taiwan. Hey, it's 100 miles wide at its narrowest. This is a pretty formidable barrier for the Red Chinese military to get across. The Taiwanese army is pretty capable, certainly no match for the Red Army if they were, if that Strait of Taiwan wasn't there, and maybe even with it there, they may not be able to hold them back. But that Strait of Taiwan is really a key factor. The other key factor is the United States of America. The United States has been a big supporter of Taiwan for years. We have no official agreement that we will come to their aid if they are attacked by China. But we have always said, no, we will ensure Taiwan's freedom. Will we really? Are we going to go to war with China, giant nuclear-armed China, over Taiwan? That's the question that keeps the Taiwanese leaders up at night. How much can you rely on the United States if it comes to a shooting war with China? But the threat is sufficient that the Red Chinese have not tried to take over Taiwan militarily. However, they are using all kinds of pressure to work against Taiwan, okay? Both economic and diplomatic. They want to isolate Taiwan from the rest of the world. Here's a few examples. Airlines, if you list Taiwan as not part of China, then we're not going to let your airlines do business in China. Well, hey, China is like this huge market. So the airlines kind of cave in and they don't list Taiwan as a separate country. There's constant pressure on the handful of countries that still recognize Taiwan, still have diplomatic relations with Taiwan, to break those relations. The most recent one, Burkina Faso. Often it's economic pressure. Sometimes they just pay them. Hey, break relations with Taiwan. Stupid, silly little things. A Japanese retailer that was importing things into China was fined because one of their coat hangers had a little picture of Taiwan as a country, just on the hangers. You know, something they didn't even think about, but they got fined for it. China is constantly trying to keep Taiwan from attending any international meetings. Sometimes they force them to come as an observer, but sometimes they don't even want them there as an observer. And China is a powerful enough player around the world that they can exclude Taiwan and force other countries to exclude Taiwan. And then they are constantly doing little military maneuvers in the Taiwan Strait, just kind of sending a message, hey, Taiwan, we're here. We've got a big military, and someday we're coming for you. Will it happen? Nobody knows. The Chinese have really been building their navy lately, so we may see it someday. It's going to be a scary time if it ever happens. So, all right, hey, there we go. That's Taiwan, and just a quick mention of China and Japan. Tomorrow, our next lecture, we'll look at China and learn a little bit more about that in depth. So, have a great day. See ya.